Good evening and welcome to Infosys Battle Round 2. That's exactly what we're calling it. I'm Supriya, Shrinate, and we're going to talk about the uneasy truce between the Infosys board and its founding fathers. It looks like it has come to an end right now because Narayan Murthy has fired a fresh salvo against the pay hike for Chief Operating Officer Praveen Rao, opening yet another can of worms at the tech bellwether. In a tell-all letter, Murthy has raised serious concerns with regards to the disproportionate hike for the top management and the lapses in corporate governance thereof. Infosys founding father has accused the board of severe lapses in corporate governance and has said that the trend of compensations running riot will erode the trust and faith that employees have in the management. Let's take this straight across to an expert panel that's joining us to answer the questions about, is Murthy justified? Should the board pay more heed? What is really the issue around executive compensation and all of that? I'm joined by Balakrishnan, former CFO of Infosys, Rajiv Kumar Senior Fellow, CPR, now of course member the RBI board, Sandeep Parekh, founder Finsec Law Advisors, and Sunil Alagh, chairman SKA Advisors. Thanks each one of you for being with us and joining us on the show this evening. And but Bala, because you've been at Infosys and because you've served in the company, what do you make of the latest fallout between the promoters and the management, the concerns that Murthy has raised on the chief operating operators pay hike? How do you read these developments? There was an uneasy truce of sorts, and it looks like a fresh fault line has opened yet again.
No, I think it's a continuation of what he had been talking for the last 1 or 2 months. I think the governance standards at Infosys has come down drastically. The large shareholders, the founders, has raised a lot of concerns. The board has not addressed those, and now they are trying to increase the wages for the senior management disproportionately. When the company is not doing well, when the shares are not performing, the last 3 years we have negative return on the stock. So when the shareholders' value is getting destroyed, when the rest of the organization is not getting material wage increases, increasing salary of senior managers at such a steep level sends a wrong message. Leadership example is the biggest cultural thing any company can have. If leaders are paid disproportionately, when the rest of the organization doesn't get that much, it shows very bad on the leadership, the board and the management.
I'll just come to the pay aspect in a bit from now, but Rajiv Kumar, come in on that. Do you believe this is round 2 of the promoter versus the board fight? Bala seems to suggest this is a continuation of sorts, but do you essentially believe that's round 2?
No, I'm not sure if it's appropriate to call it Infosys Battle 2.0. I think it's the same issue, and it's the continuation of the earlier sort of battle, if you like, or the earlier conversation, and which I think is necessarily led by Mr. Narayan Murthy, to say that we now need some ethical regulations or some ethical considerations while fixing the salaries or giving the raises or promotions to people within the senior management. I think the issue has been the same, which is that can there be no sort of regulations at all on what the senior management is paid, especially when the juniors, when regular workers are paid much less. And I think that issue was raised at that time, is the same issue now. The board of the Infosys should have taken the signals at that point. They chose not to do so. So I think in that sense, Narayan Murthy, Balakrishnan and Pai are well within their right to point out that, look, their voice has been unheard.
It's interesting you say that, because I'm going to get in Sunil Alagh. And Sunil Alagh, Dr. Rajiv Kumar believes this isn't round 2, but the board perhaps is not paying as much heed and is not listening to concerns raised by promoters. Do you believe this is a new front that Narayan Murthy has opened?
No, I don't think, look, Narayan Murthy is one of the founders of Infosys, as you know, and obviously he has spent a lot of time understanding people and developed a particular culture of Infosys. Now he stepped off. So there's a difference between what I think a promoter who is still in the company and is trying to run the company, and the other is the promoter that has stepped away completely. Now, as far as I'm concerned, promoters who have stepped away completely should be kind of, I would say, conscience keepers of the organization, and they should be speaking to the board and the members involved in a closed door meeting rather than making it public. I think the only time I would recommend that somebody goes public with it is if he has tried his best, and we don't know whether he has or not, with the existing executive team and the board, and they continue not to listen to him, and that's when he goes public. But if he has not done the first part, then I think it's wrong on his part to take it public, because it damages the organization, including his shareholding and everybody else. That's what my view is. So I don't know whether he first attempted to speak to the people and then come out because they were not listening, or did he just go off on his own. I would not recommend going off on his own.
All right. All right, you would not recommend him going on his own. But Sandeep Parekh come in all of that, because V. Balakrishnan believes this is a corporate governance issue. Rajiv Kumar is of the opinion that board is not paying enough heed to what the promoters are saying. But executive compensation seems to be the big bone of contention in round 1 and in round 2. Do you really believe this is a corporate governance issue?
No, I don't think so. See, I think you really need to segregate two issues. One is the moral, ethical rationale, and the other is the legal corporate governance issue. So I don't see any legal corporate governance issue whatsoever, because it's gone through the process in terms of it must have gone through the remuneration committee, it must have gone to the board of directors who must have approved it, and it has gone to the shareholders who approved it by a majority. Now, to say that the losing side has to have its way is, I think, that itself is contrary to corporate governance. It's a bit like the EVM debate. If we lose, the EVMs are tampered. If we win by the largest majority in the history of India, then they're not tampered. So I believe that we should respect the mandate of the investors. They do believe that these people deserve to be compensated, and that alone can define corporate governance, not that all employees should be paid exactly the same. I mean, in a very ideal socialist world, yes, nobody should die of hunger, but we do live in a society where inequality does occur, and in the Western world this inequality is much higher. I'm not saying we should replicate the Western world, but at the same time, to say it's illegal or against corporate governance norms is not accurate.
All right, so this isn't illegal, this isn't unethical, as Sandeep Parekh is pointing out. But V. Balakrishnan, I want to take this debate back to you. Mr. Murthy chose to write a public letter of sorts, shared it with the media. What is the best way to air differences in a case like this? You've been a part of Infosys. It was a very different culture of sorts, because everybody keeps referring to the Infosys culture. Why take the battle public instead of sorting it out privately? That perhaps could have been done.
No, all the back channel talks have happened, but the board is not acting on those. I think that's why it's coming to public. When a large shareholder raises some issues, any matured board will directly engage with them, address the issues and move on. Here the board is immature. I don't think they understood the complexities of the issues. They are not taking any step to address those issues. I think the board should take the step forward, engage with the shareholders and address the concerns. Otherwise all this will be in public.
Rajiv Kumar, Bala wants us to believe that backroom channels were at work because the board did not pay heed. Narayan Murthy chose to go public. But is this what should have been done? Shouldn't this be resolved perhaps more privately, more amicably? Because this is really taking on the board.
Of course, they could have been, and they should have been done more amicably. And I think that was the understanding that the president of the board, the chairman of the board, Mr. Sheshasai, had reached with the the original promoters of the company. I don't know, I'm not privy to what has happened, that that agreement was not adhered to and has been breached. But knowing Mr. Narayan Murthy, whom I have recently met for a longest time, just earlier last month, knowing him rather well, I don't think he is doing it just out of spite or out of a share of sense of adventurism. He is a person who takes these things seriously, and he is wedded to Infosys. But maybe he is pursuing a larger cause, which is reported today and which he talks about quite often these days, about promoting what he calls compassionate capitalism, without which he sees no future of the free market and private capitalism in India.
I'll come to that in just a bit, and I'm going to specifically discuss executive compensation because it has become such a point of discussion. But Sandeep Parekh, V. Balakrishnan believes that backroom channels were at work. The board is perhaps incompetent. That's the word he's used. He's almost calling them inefficient as well. Now, if the promoter group does not have faith in this kind of a board, and he's actually put out there saying that both Mr. Seshasai should quit as chairman, I mean, what is the way forward in this fight? Because this is a public showdown of sorts.
See, first of all, I am very uncomfortable with this whole concept of backroom channels. I really don't buy that. I think it's beyond a point it becomes a direct violation of insider trading norms, because all these things become price sensitive issues. So I'm not in great favor of having these backroom channels work at all. Either the company should deal with all shareholders equally, or they should deal with shareholders in a public and open manner. So I'm not at all comfortable with backroom channels, and it's okay if minority shareholders disagree. We've seen a lot of minority shareholders disagree in many cases, and I think it's a fair fight. I mean, certainly many shareholders do disagree that these kind of numbers should not have been given. But having said that, just because you're winning this battle or you're losing this battle doesn't mean the other side is wrong. There are certainly, there are certainly two sides to the issue in terms of what the number should have been, whether the company is not doing all that well, whether these kind of numbers should be awarded to top management but not to the rest of the employees. But those are kind of more compensation issues. They need to kind of benchmark to peers. They need to look at performance. They need to look at retention ability. So there are lots of things at play. And I think it's not fair to characterize it as a failure of corporate governance.
That's a valid point indeed, and it is, as one of the biggest champions of that, Sandeep Parekh believes that backroom channels are perhaps not something that he's comfortable with. But Sunil Alagh, you started off your answer earlier in the show saying that the promoter group needs to be the conscience keeper of the board. But I'm going to ask you the more uncomfortable question. At what stage does this become interference? Because the fault line that we see, which is only widening at Infosys, is about executive pay repeatedly. So, I mean, being a conscience keeper, this is executive pay matter. At what stage does this become interference?
I think when you start dealing with pays, it does become a bit of interference. Whereas if you are talking about the direction that the company is taking and the impact that it has on the brand name and the brand image, then the conscience keeper is very important. Because if you take the Tata Cyrus Mistry one, there it wasn't a question of pay, it was a question of what the Tata name stands for and what is the legacy that has been left behind, and then the conscience keeper comes into play. And I think Mr. Ratan Tata was very, very right in moving in, because two things from what I've been able to gather there. He first tried to informally speak to Cyrus Mistry and the board, but I gather that Cyrus Mistry was not listening, and that's when it became public. But as far as pays are concerned and how do you run a company, I think after a certain period of time, maybe after 1 or 2 years of you leaving the organization, I don't think you should be stepping in on that issue. And it's surely not a corporate governance issue as Mr. Narayan Murthy has made it.
Right. Bala, come in on that. What do you make of the argument? And I'm going to really get down to the bone of contention here. What is the bone of contention? That Praveen Rao, the Chief Operating Officer's salary is way too high for Mr. Murthy's comfort, and he's flagging off that issue. Rajiv Kumar seems to be throwing his weight behind this one. But what do you make of an argument that while founders can take modest pay because they also sit on a lot of shares, and that's a lot of wealth, but that is really not the case with professionals, and which is why they need to be compensated properly. I mean, we keep going back to that point about top talent for the top dollar.
No, it's a wrong argument. I mean, even Praveen has got a lot of shares. He's one of the oldest employees in the company. It's not about that. Leadership is all about taking the pain first, then pass it down to the rest of the organization. That is a value system the company always followed. I mean, you can't change the culture of the company. Here you have a management and the board which is trying to change the culture, doesn't understand the history, doesn't understand the value system, doesn't understand the governance standards of the company, and trying to change the culture of the company is very bad.
You know, I for one never get this change of culture of the company, because with time cultures will also change. And Rajiv Kumar, let me throw this to you. Where exactly are you on this whole issue of executive compensation? You know, people believe that top talent deserves better pay. I mean, that is what free market is all about, is it not? Or should you restrict and put a cap and a curb on what executive pay should be?
Supriya, I must confess that I've now begun to change my own position on this. Earlier, I was quite firmly of the view that the market determines these salaries and these emoluments, and so therefore you have to pay what the market would bear. But having recently compared what happens in East Asia to what happens in Europe and especially the USA, I now tend to believe more and more that there's got to be some caps in place so that the inequity within the salaried class in the organized sector doesn't keep worsening over the years. And I think that because that sends a signal which is quite inappropriate and also not in keeping with the overall economic position of our country. So when I see a lot of these, the emoluments in the financial sector especially, and now also in the manufacturing and the IT sector, which are multiples of tens of crores per annum, in a country where your per capita income is 1.5 lakh, for a person, or where the organized sector average salary is barely, I think, about 12 or 13 lakh per annum. I think there has got to be some questioning of this. I am not saying that there can be a government fiat on this, but I think it is time for some soul searching as to whether these executives who are paid these enormous salaries going up to 40, 50 crore per annum do add value of that equivalence for the company, and whether such salaries are actually justified in our society.
All right. Okay, that's really your view. But Sunil Alagh, you've been a part of Indian industry, held important position there. What is really the big deal about Praveen Rao's salary? Because just for the benefit of our viewers, it's important to clarify, it's the variable component which has seen that astronomical rise, and this is based on targets. So I'm just curious to know, what is the big deal about his variable component salary, which in any case he'll get only when he achieves those targets, only when he ticks those boxes?
First and foremost, the amount of money that the CEO of Infosys is getting, which is roughly, I think, about 4 crores on the fixed part. I mean, it's no big shake. You would just see whatever CEOs of much smaller companies are getting, it's much higher. So I wouldn't argue about giving the gentleman 4 crores of rupees compared to what the CEO is earning. Then there's a massive gap between the COO and CEO of Infosys. Now, variable pay is linked to the performance of the company. So I don't think any commitment is made on behalf of the board to the individual that whether you perform or you don't perform, you will get this. And I'm sure that the variable pay amount runs right through the organization from top to bottom. So if the organization doesn't perform, nobody gets variable pay including the CEO and CEO. So I wouldn't worry too much about the variable pay part, because that is linked to performance for that year. It's not a permanent commitment. But the fixed part, which is in itself not much, in my mind, it's a hullabaloo over nothing actually.
Sandeep Parekh, I want to ask you a question straight up. Mr. Sikka is making all these hires, while he's in the Valley, he's making these hires in the United States. By that logic, should the chief operating officer of a company, because he's based out of India, be paid less than those people? Because he does occupy a very important position. The whole debate is around the variable pay component really. He's not somebody who's like the promoter holds significant number of shares. He may hold a few, yes, by the virtue of being in such a senior role. But all I'm asking is it justified then that senior hires in the US should be paid more than what a chief operating officer is making? There has to be some kind of a pay parity.
That's for me.
That's for you, yes, Sandeep.
Is that for me? Yeah. No, so I'm uncomfortable discussing this question in terms of what should be the compensation based on what people earn in the country. I think by that metric, pretty much anybody who's making more than me and you is kind of making too much. I don't think it's right for us to discuss this. It's based on a lot of factors. It's based on, and as you rightly said, most of it is performance based. The performance, don't look at the stock price, but if you look at the performance last 2 years, it's been extremely, the numbers have been extremely good. There are a lot of challenges ahead, no doubt, which is why they probably need to kind of focus on the variable pay. But having said that, I don't think any of us should be really second guessing what the board and the shareholders have done in this company. We may disagree with it strongly, certainly, and we have a right to speak against it. I can say, yes, it's too high. But again, these are just voices, these are noises really, not even voices. And even if you're a promoter or an ex-promoter, you certainly have a right to say that you disagree with these large numbers, because you came from an ethos in the company where senior people used to get paid a lot less. They did not travel by private jet, etc. But the companies do change, and I think part of it has to do with different kind of ethos which existed 15-20 years back. But if you look at the market economy today, if you look at the challenges of artificial intelligence, I think companies will have to be a lot more forward-looking rather than backward-looking in their ethos.
That's a very valid point indeed. But Rajiv Kumar, if I may throw this to you, I'm kind of running out on time here. Is it easy for any manager to work by the virtue of being under the constant hawkish eye of the promoter group? I mean, everything that Sesha Sai or Sikka are doing is being scanned. They're answerable to the promoter group. My larger question is it easy for a manager to deliver? Rajiv Kumar.
Well, it should not be difficult, because the promoter has effectively and for many years withdrawn himself and themselves actually from the management of the company. I think the issue which has come under glare, and none of the other issues or the way the company is being run, etc., has been ever in contention, and Sikka has had the freest of hands as far as I can see. The only issue is that of these emoluments, of these very large pay packets given earlier, or severance packages. And I think that is where Mr. Sikka and the board would do well to confer once and for all with the promoters and come to an understanding. Because I think the public opinion, unfortunately for the current management, doesn't seem to be supporting them.
So I'm not so sure if public opinion should be a measure of what the management of the board is doing, but I'm going to come to that in just a bit. Sunil Alagh, what does this entire spat do to shareholders, to the reputation of the company? I'm sure a public spat like this is damaging, because Narayan Murthy is not just one irate promoter. He's absolutely iconic in that sense as far as the tech industry is concerned. His word carries a lot of weight, and even then, the fact that he's questioning the board and the executives over and over again on issues like compensation, it must be pretty damaging for reputations, aren't they?
Yeah, I come back to the point again. This is something that should be discussed behind closed doors and not made public at all. So I asked that question because I'm unaware of it. Did Mr. Narayan Murthy have a closed door meeting with the board and everyone else, and then he's come out in the open because he's saying nobody is listening? Then perhaps he's got a point, because he feels that the culture of Infosys is being damaged, and so is the brand image. But if he's taking it public without discussing it with the board, then I think it's very, very unfair on the current board. It's very unfair on the COO. It's very unfair on the entire team, because we don't have the full picture other than what the COO or the CEO's salary is. And that's about it. And if you take a look at it, it's not something which is a massive amount which is being given away as fixed. And variable, well, come on, I mean, you get zero if that year if the company doesn't perform. It's up to the board to set the standards from which the variable pay begins.
Ask a lot of us who have variable pays and we can tell you all about that pain there. But Bala, we can go back to discussing Praveen's resolution. We can go back to saying that the board may be incompetent. But the fact is that the resolution went through a majority, even though Narayan Murthy may have abstained. But majority believed that it was right to pay Praveen so much if he achieved those targets.
No, it's a democracy. Shareholders as a whole could have approved it. But I think this is the first time any proposal put by the company has got so many votes against it. It is not that it is a cakewalk. A lot of people are against it. So I think the board should relook at it and take a view on it, listen to the promoters, have some change, restructure the board and make sure the company's value systems are protected.
Okay, but Bala, do you see promoters will take any other steps to assert their rights? Perhaps put a resolution at the AGM, because you were pointing out there that this is the first time that a proposal put forward had so many no's.
I don't know. You have to ask them. As a shareholder, I am very disappointed with the board of Infosys. I think you need new leadership in the board to engage with the founders and address the issue. The current leadership has not delivered. That's why I think the current chairman should step down, get a new chairman or interim chairman, engage with the founders, address the issues and move on. I think what is happening in the company is very disappointing and disturbing.
Sandeep Parekh, we'll let you have the last word. As a former employee of Infosys, Bala sounds very distressed. Rajiv Kumar believes the promoters and management is at spat because management perhaps is not paying as much heat. Sunil Alagh believes they don't need to pay so much heat. Where exactly are you on this debate as we close this? This is round 2. This is perhaps another flashpoint. I am sure there will be more flashpoints to come going forward. We've looked at the story from the view of promoters. The whole culture of Infosys needs to be preserved and persevered. My question really is, if you were the management of Infosys, how should you be reading into these developments? Because every action of yours is being scanned, debated and deliberated upon, and yet like Rajiv Kumar said, it looks like the public opinion is also against this. Do you agree with this?
Yes, so as I said, I don't think you need to go by public opinion. Public opinion does not own the shares of Infosys. The investors of Infosys who get to vote on this, and they have, by an overwhelming majority, they voted for it, even though the numbers of no's may be higher. But by that logic, we should have a coalition of non-BJP parties in almost every election over the last 2 years. If the simple principle of law is that majority wins, and in some cases 3/4 majority is required or 2/3 majority is required, and these have certainly passed the required thresholds for compensation pay. Ultimately, the CEO does not compensate himself; it's the board which has and the compensation committee which has gone into all the complexities. You and I may disagree with it, Mr. Bala may disagree with it, but ultimately we have to respect what the board has done and what the shareholders have done. Finally, it's not just the board, because the shareholders, if you disagree with the shareholders, unfortunately there's no way to throw out shareholders, and that's where it rests. I don't think we really need to look beyond the legal provisions and get into ethical and public opinion concepts in assessing this entire situation.
All right, in the legal and corporate sphere of things, the Infosys board and the promoters are on warpath, but like Sandeep was pointing out, their public opinion should have no weightage whatever in this fight. It's a fantastic discussion because 2 on our panel are backing the promoters and 2 are backing the management. But thank you very much, Sandeep Parekh, Rajiv Kumar, Sunil Alagh and Balakrishnan for being with us on the special show. Thank you viewers for tuning in. Keep it with ET Now.
Find us on Facebook at facebook.com/ETNow and don't forget to click the like button. You can also follow us on Twitter at ETNowLive. To stay updated with all our programming, hit the subscribe button on our YouTube channel by logging on to youtube.com/user/ETNow.